Good morning. Today for this video I thought I'd explain a little bit about the material that you're going to be using, because a lot of people don't know about rubber and how it's made, and I certainly don't know much about it. In fact, didn't know anything about rubber before I got into this business. So what I know about it is just things I've picked up. The rubber itself is highly technical stuff. There's people that are rubber chemists, and they usually work at the place that mixes the rubber, and they're able to determine just what goes into this stuff and what elements of it change the characteristics of it. The rubber material itself, usually the formula for mixing it and everything, although I have the formula, but they call it a recipe, and the recipe is kept at the place that mixes the rubber, kind of kept on file. So when you go to a rubber mixer and you order the rubber, they usually have a file that tells them how you want the rubber delivered to your place of business. In other words, the place I use is called Gold Key. I use them because it's extremely clean shop, and I think they're very good at mixing consistently, so that I get the same thing every time. And they're not cheap, but because of the parts I'm making don't really require that much rubber, I'd rather go with a real high quality rubber from a place that's real consistent in the mixing of it, so I know it's the same every time. That sometimes doesn't have to do with the quality of the rubber that's the finished product, but sometimes it has to do with the way it works, the way it flows in the mold, so that when I say, well, if I set the time at such and such on the timer, I know that each time when I set it at like 14 minutes, it's going to cure at 14 minutes the same as it did with the last batch of rubber I had. So anyways, they'll keep a file, and they will say, well, when we deliver rubber to this guy, it's going to be, about so thick and so wide, and he wants it in sheets, what they call sheeted. This is a sheeted rubber, and it comes out of a thing called a mill, which is really a device that chews the rubber. It's just like if you had a stick of chewing gum. It's very similar to chewing gum. Chewing gum, you'll notice, has like a powder on it. I think it's probably sugar and something else, but this has the same way. What that does is it keeps the rubber from sticking to the wrapper. The chewing gum won't stick to the wrapper. Rubber like this, when it's sheeted, if you laid another sheet of rubber on top of that, like this piece here, which doesn't have that white powder on it, if you laid it on there for very long, those two would fuse together and they'd get stuck together, just storing them that way. Particularly if you got a big high stack and there's some pressure on it, you'd end up with one big block of rubber. If that were to ever happen, you'd have to go to somebody else that has a rubber mill, which is sort of like a wringer washing machine, where there's a couple of rollers that turn, only they turn at different speeds. One's turning a little faster than the other, and the rubber's stuck between these, and it'll pull that rubber between them two rollers, but because of different speed, it's putting a little shear stress on the rubber, and the rubber will get hot, and it mixes it. You can mix rubber on a mill. You can put the chemicals in it and make the stuff, but they also have machines that do it, and that's another reason I'm using Gold Key, because they have a small mixer. I need small amounts of rubber, and they can mix, I think it's 114 pounds, at least 100 pounds. You can order 100 pounds of rubber, you'll get about 114 usually. But that's the size that their mixer takes, and that has a couple of rotors in it or something that really chew the rubber up in there and mix the stuff through it. But the mill is more like a wringer washing machine, and after it comes out of the mixer, they sheet the rubber by putting it through a mill, which will roll it, it'll spit it out into a sheet like this, which they can adjust the thickness of it, and apparently also the width. So I want the narrowest width I can get, because I'm just using this cutting board to cut the rubber, so I don't want it too wide. I mean, if I got a sheet that was, say, as wide as this sheet, it'd be a little hard for me to work with because I don't have a cutter that big. So you can get it like that. You can get it in strips, and but generally, the way I've been doing it, this is what I'm getting right here. Now this white stuff on there is, they told me it's zinc, but it may be other chemicals. I don't know exactly what's in that powder. There's different companies that sell different things. It comes out of the dip. After it comes out of the mill, it goes into a tank with water and this zinc mixed with it. And when it comes out of there, there's a machine that cuts it to lengths so that it'll fit in a big cardboard box. And anyways, this machine that cuts that stuff, they're going to cut it to pretty much a consistent length, and it'll be pretty much a consistent width, although you see here it's a little funny shape here on the end. But you don't worry about that. It's hard to work with this stuff when it's uncured. But like chewing gum, this powder keeps it from sticking to each other, and I like to remove this powder. That's why you see that piece doesn't have this white powder on it. It's necessary to keep it this way until you're ready to use it. You leave the white powder on. And then, to get real consistent results, I like to take the white powder off. The rubber shops will tell you the white powder doesn't mean anything. It doesn't hurt anything. You don't have to do anything about that powder. That when it gets in a hot mold, it just disappears or something. But I still like to remove it. I figure if it keeps the rubber from sticking to itself while it's just sitting there, it may have the same effect in the mold. So I always remove this stuff. And you can use, like this is just a paper towel that's damp with water. And you can see, let me dry it off here so you can see. It's just water. We'll take it off. You see how it is? I myself sometimes like to use soap. You could even use something like a little 409 or something from the dollar store, put on there. And it would take off that white powder off there, you see? And that way, I'm sure that that's not going to interfere with the part I'm making. So I just wipe it off like that. Now obviously this, for the amount of rubber I'm using, if I'm making diaphragms, this sheet of rubber is going to run me all day. I mean, that's a lot of rubber there. And as long as it's clean, I shouldn't have any problem with it all day long. But what you have to watch out for is a clean shop, because if I were to lay this piece, now before I laid this here, I cleaned this off with some of this too to make sure that this table was real clean. Because if there's, well, let's say a chip. I mean, I'm making molds here. I got a machine shop. If there's a chip or something, this is soft. Chips could get embedded in the rubber. A little piece of baling wire in the rubber could be in there, because the rubber comes in bales, and if the place that mixes it for you doesn't cut those wires off the bale, it could end up a little piece of that stuff in the rubber. And obviously that piece of wire in your mold could mess up your mold. So that's why I want to use a good high quality mixer. I don't want to go to any fly-by-night mixer. I want good stuff. Okay, the other thing about rubber, because I don't know that much about it, other than it works similar to cookie dough, or molding is kind of like making waffles. You know, you have a mold, it's hot, it squeezes a waffle, you pour the batter in there, and once the waffle's made, that's it. You can't remake the waffle. If the waffle isn't right, you have to throw it away. There's no, it's a chemical state. It's changed state chemically from the heat, and that's what's required to cure the rubber. The mixer puts in, just before they mix it up and give it to you, the right amount of cure in that rubber. The cure could be sulfur or peroxide. Don't ask me the difference, because I don't know. If you want to know a lot about it, you can get this. These are real expensive books, but I have one here. It's called the Vanderbilt Rubber Handbook. This will tell you everything about rubbers, what sorts of chemicals are in it, rubber formulas, a lot of recipes for rubber in here for different kinds. And it'll tell you what rubbers are good for what sorts of chemicals they'll stand up to, what sort of plasticizers and things like that can be added to it. There's a lot of different things in the rubber, and it's kind of technical. So, but you don't have to know anything about that, because I sure don't. The chemist up there needs to know about it. What they give you when you pick up your sheet of rubber is a test report. This will show you different graphs on here that they do with something they call a rheometer. It's sort of like a rubber press. The platens are heated, and you put a piece of this rubber in there, and it twists it back and forth while it's heating it. It's twisting it. And it measures, I suppose, by just measuring the amps on the motor, how much power it takes to twist this, to work it while it's hot. And then as it cures from the heat, it's going to start curing. And then that puts more and more load on the motor. And they'll give you they call that a rheometer, is what they call it here. Let's see, the test type is rheometer. And that shows you how, when it's hot and you first put it in there, it's this much resistance at first. And then as it heats up, you can see where the resistance goes down. That's where it gets like toothpaste. And then the longer it's in there over time, these are in minutes down here, you can see it starts getting stiffer and stiffer and stiffer. It's taking more and more power to do this as the rubber is curing. And then they'll usually tell you how many minutes. This is in 12 minutes, you see. And this is the torque in foot-pounds that it took to twist the rubber. They'll give you one of these reports every time you pick up rubber. Now obviously, I don't know enough about it to even know what these are, but the thing you should look for about them is that this line right here, it's kind of hard to see on this one, but you can see it matches this one almost identically. See, after 12 minutes, you see where the end of the line is. It's almost the same here, so I know I'm getting real consistent results with that rubber. That's what these test reports are. If you ask somebody up there when you go to pick up the rubber, they don't know what this is or how to read it either. They know very little about it, same as me. But it's not necessary to know. Everything you really need to know is in here. This is real technical, and a lot of this is just stuff you won't understand either, but you can get information out of here. Some of it I understand. So anyways, that's all there is to the rubber material. Now, as far as keeping the material, the rubber mixer will tell you to use this usually within 30 days because the cure has been put in it. And also, if you store it long enough, particularly if it's in a warm room, I don't want to keep it in the press room here. I keep it out in the basement where it's cooler. In the wintertime, I might even keep it out in the garage where it's really cool in there because it will last longer. The shelf life is going to be longer. If it sits long enough, because the curing agent has been put in here, it will eventually cure and turn into a piece of rubber like this stuff, which is like a conveyor belt here, a piece of conveyor belt. It will cure, and it will do that usually with sometime after the, say, 30 days or so, but warm temperatures make it cure faster. And then you won't be able to work it. If you put it in a mold, it's just like a piece of this. The mold will just stop dead. That press won't squeeze it. It's just going to stop. Even though the press is hot and everything else, you won't be able to work that rubber once it's cured. So you want to, it's just like cookie dough, you want to use it before it sets up. In other words, and that usually is within, I'd say, 3 to 4 weeks anyways, you got to work with this stuff. But like I say, storing it in a cool place helps a lot. Don't keep it in the press room. Don't lay a sheet of rubber on the press because by the next day you won't be able to use it. It'll cure just from the temperature, how hot it gets. It's pretty warm up on top of there. It will eventually cure from that heat. And that's the way the rubber works. So I think that probably covers it. I've already showed you how to cut it. I have a video on that. And when you call for the rubber, you get just a small, I'm getting a small batch made, and that's what I'm going to get right there. Now, like I say, the main thing you want to watch is real clean because it's soft. It's, you know, you put your thumbnail in it, that mark's going to stay. Where this is cured rubber, you put your thumbnail in there, it pops back. You can't leave a mark on it. This stuff here, I mean, it's tough, but if you bite it, see, leaves your teeth marks in there. So it doesn't pop back because it's not cured yet. It's not rubber. It's plastic. It's not elastic. And that's the difference between uncured rubber and cured rubber. So main thing is keep it clean. Don't let any dirt or chips get in it. Is really bad. One problem here, I suppose when I'm running this press, I should probably wear a hat on my head so human hair doesn't fall in there because I'm making very thin parts here sometimes. So something like that could make a little hole in the rubber if you had